When you think of the major powers of World War II, which countries come to mind? The United States, Britain, the Soviet Union? Absolutely. But what about Canada? From a nation of just 11 million people, over 1 million men and women served in uniform. That's an incredible 1 in 10 Canadians. Today, we are rediving deep into the story of Canada's immense and often overlooked contribution to the Allied victory in the Second World War. It's a tale of courage, innovation, and sacrifice that shaped not only the outcome of the war, but the very identity of modern Canada. Let's rewind to September 1939. When Britain declared war on Germany, there was no automatic obligation for Canada to join. Unlike in World War I, Canada made its own independent decision. On September 10, 1939, a week after Britain, the Canadian Parliament voted to declare war. Prime Minister Mackenzie King promised there would be no conscription for overseas service, a vow that would later be tested. Initially, the contribution was modest. The permanent army was tiny, the Air Force had outdated planes, and the Navy was small, but the country mobilized with astonishing speed. One of Canada's most vital contributions began immediately. The British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. This massive undertaking turned Canada into what President Roosevelt called the aerodrome of democracy. Across the vast open prairies and clear skies, airmen from Great Britain, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada itself were trained. By the end of the war, this plan had trained over 130,000 pilots, navigators, bomb-aimers, and airgunners. It was a colossal logistical achievement, establishing hundreds of airfields and training schools, and it was crucial for gaining air superiority over Europe. Meanwhile, Canadian industry underwent a radical transformation. Factories that once made cars and refrigerators were retooled to produce tanks, aircraft, and naval vessels. Canada became a major producer of military vehicles, earning the nickname the Arsenal of the Allies. It built over 800,000 military trucks, thousands of tanks like the Ram and Grizzly, and a staggering number of aircraft, including the Lancaster bomber and the Mosquito fighter bomber. Canadian shipyards also worked tirelessly, building hundreds of warships. Most notably, the versatile corvette, which played a key role in the Battle of the Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic. This was the longest continuous military campaign of the war, and Canada was at its heart. German U-boats or wolf packs were devastating Allied shipping, threatening to cut off Britain's lifeline of supplies. The Royal Canadian Navy, which started the war with just a handful of ships, expanded exponentially. Its primary job was to escort convoys of merchant ships across the treacherous North Atlantic. The sailors, many of them young volunteers, faced constant danger from U-boats, terrible weather, and icy waters. By the war's end, the Royal Canadian Navy had become one of the largest Allied navies, having escorted over 25,000 merchant ship crossings, ensuring that vital food, fuel, and troops reached Britain. Canadian soldiers first saw major combat in the ill-fated raid on Dieppe in August 1942. Nearly 5,000 of the 6,000-strong force were Canadian. The objective was to test German coastal defenses and gather intelligence. The raid was a disaster. The element of surprise was lost. The tanks got bogged down on the steep pebble beach, and the troops faced withering fire. In just a few hours, over 900 Canadians were killed, and nearly 2,000 were taken prisoner. It was a brutal lesson in the challenges of amphibious assault, but the sacrifices at Dieppe provided invaluable knowledge that was later applied to the successful D-Day landings. From the tragedy of Dieppe, Canadian forces moved to the Mediterranean. In July 1943, the 1st Canadian Infantry Division took part in the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky. They fought their way through rugged, mountainous terrain against determined German and Italian defenders. The campaign was tough and costly, but the Canadians proved their mettle. From Sicily, they advanced onto the Italian mainland, fighting a grueling campaign up the boot of Italy. One of the most famous and brutal battles was for the town of Ortona in December 1943. The fighting was house to house, street by street, in what became known as Little Stalingrad. The Canadians eventually captured the town, but at a high price, further cementing their reputation as elite shock troops. Then came the moment the world had been waiting for. D-Day, June 6, 1944. Canada was given a crucial role, tasked with capturing one of the 5 landing beaches, codenamed Juno. The 3rd Canadian Infantry Division stormed ashore facing heavy fortifications, mines, and intense machine gun fire. Despite the chaos and the casualties, the Canadians fought their way through the German defenses. In fact, on D-Day, Canadian forces advanced further inland than any other Allied troops. It was a remarkable achievement and a testament to their training and determination. The capture of Juno Beach was a pivotal success, a hard-won foothold on the path to liberating France. After D-Day, the fight was far from over. Canadians played a key role in the Battle of Normandy, including the brutal fighting to close the Falaise Gap, trapping a large German army. As the Allies pushed across northwest Europe, the 1st Canadian Army, under General Harry Carrère, was given the critical and difficult task of clearing the coastal areas and, most importantly, clearing the Scheldt estuary. The port of Antwerp was vital for supplying the Allied advance, but the Germans controlled the heavily fortified banks of the Scheldt River. The battle fought in flooded, muddy terrain in the autumn of 1944 was one of the toughest of the war. After a month of bitter fighting, the Canadians succeeded, opening Antwerp to Allied shipping and sealing the fate of the German war machine. The final major Canadian contribution in Europe was the liberation of the Netherlands. In the spring of 1945, Canadian forces advanced into a country that had endured years of brutal occupation and was now suffering a terrible famine known as the Hunger Winter. As they fought to push the remaining German forces out, Canadian soldiers also organized emergency airdrops of food and supplies to the starving Dutch population. To this day, the Dutch people have a special bond with Canada. Every spring, the Netherlands sends thousands of tulip bulbs to Ottawa in a beautiful and enduring symbol of gratitude for their liberation. Back on the home front, the war effort was total. Women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers, taking on jobs in munitions factories, shipyards, and aircraft plants. They were famously known as Rosie the Riveter's Canadian cousins. Over 50,000 women also served in the military in non-combat roles. In the Canadian Women's Army Corps, the Royal Canadian Air Force Women's Division, and the Women's Royal Canadian Naval Service. The government also introduced rationing, victory bonds, and, eventually, conscription for home defense, which was later extended for overseas service in a highly divisive political crisis. By the time the war ended in 1945, Canada had paid a heavy price. Over 45,000 Canadians had lost their lives, and many thousands more were wounded. But the nation had emerged from the conflict transformed. It had the 4th largest air force and 3rd largest navy in the world. Its industrial capacity had boomed. On the world stage, Canada was no longer just a dominion of the British Empire, but a respected middle power. A key player in the founding of the United Nations and NATO. The shared sacrifice and achievement of the war forged a stronger, more confident national identity. So, the next time you reflect on World War II, remember the story of Canada. A nation that, when the world was in peril, stepped up and punched far, far above its weight. The legacy of those 1 million Canadians who served is written in the peace and freedom we enjoy today. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story of Canadian courage as inspiring as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what other aspects of Canada's history you'd like to see covered. Until next time.